Hello and welcome to In the Light Growing Your Soul with me, Anna Isabel. And I'm very excited today because I have someone who does something not many people have heard of. And her name is Sarah Donoghue. Hello, Sarah.
Hi, Anna. Hello. Thank you for having me on today.
Well, I've teased the audience and said that you do something that not many people know about. So I think we better tell them what it is.
Well, I study iridology, which is looking at people's eyes and discerning from that various things that we can see and tell by looking at people's iris.
Well, I saw that you have a book coming out later this year called Modern Iridology. And immediately I thought, I need to speak to Sarah. So tell us more then about iridology, because you were saying that it's reading the iris of the eye. How did this begin? What it seems like magic, that we're able to say anything about this, about a person through their eyes. How does this begin?
So it is a funny old subject, but I suppose once you start to read about things, there are certain things that everybody everywhere in the world will go, yes, I understand that. So originally I studied at the College of Naturopathic Medicine in London, and I had a fantastic tutor on that course, a gentleman called Peter Jackson Main, who has been a very good mentor to me, and he's looked after our health with herbs, with my health and my family's for many, many years. And he was a specialist in this area. And as part and parcel of our course, we were taught iridology. Now, at the time, this is before really everyone had mobile phones and access to digital cameras. So it was quite specialist equipment that we had access to in the college. And it was an amazing thing to be able to look at people's eyes close up. But not really something that's, practical to do in everyday life unless you've got this really very expensive equipment. So although I was really fascinated in it, and for 2-3 years we studied it in the classroom, I then went away and became a practitioner, and I didn't really, I'm honest, I didn't really use it as much as I could have done, because I didn't invest in the equipment, and also because various things happen, isn't it, with Zoom calls and stuff like that. It's not easy to look at people's eyes. So it was something that I was really interested in and read a lot about. And over lockdown, I found some old class notes with some old pictures of my eyes, and I thought, I'll go through this. And I just started writing about things, and anyway, one thing led to another, and it ended up becoming a book. But yeah, the study of people's eyes, I remember being quite a young child, and my granddad would take us on holiday, and I always remember I'd look at his eyes and he would have like a greyish circle around his iris. I always used to wonder what is that in your eye? But never, as a child you don't talk about those things. And as it happened, actually, it was what's known as a cholesterol ring. It's quite a common sign. Elderly people have these quite a lot, and it's almost like a deposit of fatty tissue which builds up in the eye. And if the doctor sees that, you go to the GP and he notices that, very often they will refer you for a blood test or a cholesterol test. Just to check that everything is okay. So there are these very common signs that people know and are well documented, and at one point were actually taught in medical schools. For example, if somebody has yellow eyes, it's a sign, isn't it, of hepatitis, or you better very quick get yourself down to the hospital because something terrible is happening with your liver there. Or if you have redness in your eyes, it can be a sign of anemia. There are many different signs that are, some are subtle and some are more obvious, that you can pick up these medical conditions that people have by looking at these classically documented signs. But then there's also the other side of iridology, which is much more intuitive. So, for example, if somebody is very depressed, you might say that the light has gone out, shine has gone out of their eyes. And you wouldn't go to the doctor, would you, and go, oh, I'm sorry, I'm really worried but because the shine's gone out of my eyes. But it's actually quite an important sign, isn't it, that somebody, in Chinese medicine they call it the master has left the house, because the person is, they're just not there anymore, and for them it's a classic sign of depression. So there are these signs that we are all kind of picking up intuitively because we know them and we recognize them. Or if in another example is in Ayurveda, it's called sanpaku, which means that if somebody's got a lot of white underneath their eyes like this because their eyes are protruding. And in some of the older books, it's not necessarily very complimentary, but they will mention that maybe somebody's going a bit mad because they've got these very starey kind of eyes. And when you see something like that, it can kind of put you on guard a little bit, can't it? And you think, oh, what's the matter with their eyes? Or so I'm fascinated by it on two levels really, which is the classical medical version of the signs that you can see, that somebody will come and that will verify what they're talking about, their medical history, that they're telling you that they have these issues that they're presenting with. But then there's also the other side of the looking at the people's eyes on how they're presenting on a one-to-one level with the person that's in front of them. That's quite a lot of information to bombard you in one go. But yes, it's a very, very interesting topic.
We do have, I think it's an innate tendency or an innate knowing that eyes are important. Just think of the importance we place on eye contact. If someone's not making eye contact, are they distracted, or is there something wrong with them? They're not interested, they're not engaging. But if somebody never makes eye contact, what's going on? We always, when a child isn't able to make eye contact, that's a real alarm, isn't it? There could be autism, there could be something that's going on there, because the child avoids making eye contact. So we know that we know that eyes are very important. The windows to the soul, we call them. We notice when somebody has beautiful eyes, and yet on a day-to-day basis, we don't really think about it, do we? We're not really paying attention to people's eyes. It's kind of there, I think, subconsciously, but it's not something that we are consciously choosing to pay attention to.
No, and I think as well, people are conscious of being too starey. You don't want to hold people's gaze for too long because that can also give off messages. But then the number of people that I've had come to the clinic, and then when they actually see a photograph of their own eyes, they're astonished. And you think, we look at ourselves every day, but do you really look? How, people say, gosh, that's me, that's my eye. I've never seen that, because we don't actually observe those things. Other people might observe them, but not ourselves. And there's all this symbology, isn't there, like the eye of Horus and the all-seeing eye, and there's much more to it, I think, than just the medical aspect of things.
And yet the medical aspect is of great interest. You've just highlighted a number of illnesses that could be diagnosed just by looking at the eyes. And that to me is absolutely fascinating. So what else might you be able to tell about a person's state of health? without without there being necessarily an illness present.
I think it's one of those things, isn't it? Observational skills that has kind of fallen out of fashion now because people are either too busy or it hasn't had any credence placed upon it. Even things like people's fingernails, you know, and you have ridges in your nails, and that can be a sign of mineral deficiencies. You know, the colour of someone's skin, you know, whether they're very going bluish or if they're very grey or pallid or yellowish tones. The quality of people's hair, whether it's, you know, very dry and brittle. We just don't pay attention to these things anymore, and yet all the signs of it, sort of signs the body is trying to communicate something to you. With the eyes, the nuance is there because we're all born with a certain constitution, which can be picked up on in the eyes, depending on, you know, the colour of a person's eyes can give indications as to you know, their genetic blueprint, their inherited makeup, as well as the structure. And so we've got that part of things on top, but then there's also the acute situation, as you mentioned, that, you know, if you woke up and you had like very red eyes or something was very different about that. I remember I worked at a school once and there was a lady who had really very bulging eyes, and she had hypothyroidism, was diagnosed from, you know, from that. So on two levels, there's the constitution that we're born with, that if you know a little bit about and you're able to intuit and work with, then it does help you to make better dietary choices. It does help you to make better lifestyle choices about the levels of stress that you're able to endure. Some people are naturally more robust than other people. But then there's also the other, you know, signs that if they come very suddenly, that's a change that needs to be followed up with.
As I've been listening to you, a question's popped into my mind, which I suppose is a bit of a question from left field, because I'm wondering whether you're able to look into the eyes of animals and see things as well.
Yeah, do you know, it's not an area that I've ever studied. I believe that you can. It would be very interesting to know if there were any vets that used this diagnostic technique, and what we could actually learn from that. I think with the human eye, it's a very defined structure. Well, I don't know. I don't know whether it is true or not for animals. I'm thinking of horses because they have very large pupils, don't they? So I wonder how much you would be able to see, and it would be quite difficult to keep the animal still to examine them. I really don't know, but that's an excellent question. I'm sure somebody
It strikes me that there must be something there, and somebody must be looking at their eyes, because their fur is also, you were talking about our hair, and it made me think about how, I can't tell you why, but when I had cats, I always knew when they weren't well by touching them. Their fur was different, and I can't describe it to you, but it felt lifeless to me. It felt like there was something missing, and inevitably there was something wrong with them when I sensed that. So it just made me think then about what we might be able to tell from an animal's eyes as well. So it's just I think I'm going to have to find out more about this now.
I think it's all about an aspect of vitality, isn't it? Like I was saying,
Yes.
if you have lackluster eyes, it's the chi, it's the prana, it's the vitalism of the person. When we're feeling very ill or very low, then that you can almost see that light diminishing, can't you? Or someone is sad. And actually, very interestingly, now I haven't read about this in a book. It was something that somebody told me, and it was somebody on my course who had an Ayurvedic background. She was trained to be an acupuncturist, and her grandfather was very intuitive and very into eyes, and we were talking about the nature of tears, which I think was fascinating. And she said, if you are angry, you have very hot tears that drip from the middle. If you are very happy, you will laugh from the side and it will all come down here, those thin watery ones. When you're sad, you have the big heavy ones that come from here. So even the makeup of your tears and where they, it's the emotion that's in. And I always thought that was really fascinating. It's not so much to do with iridology as such, but isn't it interesting that we have these, if we take the time to look, there are so many small nuances that really give us clues about how people are feeling.
That is fascinating. And not for the first time, I'm thinking, forget about exploring space. Let's just get to know our bodies better. I think as interesting as space might be, there's still so much that we don't know about our bodies.
Or
So
we've forgotten potentially
back,
because we did know about it one time and we've just moved away from these things.
exactly, yes. So I want to take you back to you were talking about the equipment. And so on the one hand, that suggests that this is a fairly recent um, discipline. And yet my instinct tells me that this precedes the equipment.
Yes, that's a difficult conundrum, isn't it? You can see the eye quite well with a magnifying glass. So there are tools like the handheld tools that you can examine the iris with. I think as far as photographing the iris and making a record of it is a bit more problematic. But I'm sure that in the past people were able to make observations in different ways. But yes, that is a good question. I think one of the issues that some of the people, the pioneers that were trying to, bring this into the mainstream originally faced was that issue of, there's a classic saying, here is the sign, where is the disease? And so people will say, well, how can you prove, that somebody is going to get ill from this or is going to have this predisposition? Is kind of by the nature of it, you have to wait until they've died to find out what was, with their ultimate demise. And there was one particular iridologist who did make a study of dead people's eyes to try to correlate, make maps and correlate things that they died of with the signs that were in the eyes, in a way to try to set up this preventative system so that if people were aware of these signs that they would be able to do something about it in advance and prevent that from manifesting. But that's always been one of the issues, is correlating the signs with the nature of the ailment, because we all know it is about nuance, isn't it? Two people with the same condition will present with totally different symptoms or different ways of dealing with things, because we are all so unique and so individual. That is it actually possible to make a generalization of these markings and signs? So that's another question that people very often will criticize iridology for, because it isn't a perfect science. But on the other hand, it's quite easy, isn't it, sort of veer into the realm of palm reading, or making it into this mystical thing that we've got the medical things on one side, but then on the other side we've got all of this kind of esoteric map to navigate, like.
Well, you were saying it's not a perfect science, and yet I don't believe that perfect science, so-called perfect science, is that perfect. Because if I present to my doctor with certain symptoms, they might be indicative of any number of issues, and B, they might be different from somebody who has got the same issue but is presenting differently. So although there are going to be certain commonalities in terms of the pattern or the symptoms, etc., everyone is very individual and very unique. And I think what you're describing is exactly the same thing, where there is certain patterns that are recognizable, that can be seen in the eyes, be it fatty deposits or the genetic makeup of of the eyes, which suggests a particular body type or health type. So there are patterns, but of course, within those patterns, there are going to be individual nuances. And I think that that's because we are human, and being human, we're all different. We're not computer programs, and it's worth remembering that.
Yeah, and I think in every case as well, isn't it? It's, what people present with doesn't necessarily tell you how they got there. So for one person, it might be that they're so predisposed to stress that has been the trigger for them, that they've gone on to develop this ailment, or somebody else, it could potentially be their diet. And so I think having a much better idea of the nature of your makeup gives you those tools, doesn't it, to learn to live within that constitution. There are, a variety of different structures in the iris that you can look at, and that, for example, there is one that has a very, very open structure, and that's kind of the idea that lots of light is coming in. So these people tend to not have so many boundaries, and they're not able to be as resilient with stress as the people that have a very tightly knit, very close fiber texture. So I think as well as looking at your physical makeup, your personality has such an impact, doesn't it, on your health and how you cope with life.
It does.
Generally more resilient, and then there are some people that are so resilient they'll go on and on and on and on and on until the point they reach adrenal burnout, and it's only then they'll go, oh yes, perhaps I should have had a rest, because they've not sort of lived within their bound. They've pushed themselves to the limit, but that's their very nature, is that they like jumping out of airplanes, or living this high flying lifestyle, whereas somebody else who maybe has got less resilience is more in tune with that, and will say, actually, I need to have a holiday today, and I'm not going to,
I
so
think
we've all got strengths and weaknesses, haven't we, is what I'm trying to say.
do. And
perfect constitution.
In terms of our constitution, we know that we have predispositions that are genetically present. And I think that's where I find iridology so interesting also, is because it's showing that side of things as well, the predispositions that are there. And then there's the, as you say, the personality or the person's disposition. And it's just like me as an astrologer looking at an individual's chart and saying, okay, so these are the strengths, these are the weaknesses, there's a predisposition towards this type of behavior, and that correlates to a particular part of the body. And so you need to take care of that, and you need to perhaps look at what you are doing in terms of your lifestyle and your frame of mind, and perhaps that your perspective needs adjusting a little bit, because it's not doing you any favors.
It's a perfect analogy, isn't it? It's almost, here's the star chart that you're born with. This is the iris that you're born with. Yet you have so many different options open to you. But if you have that map in place and that knowledge there, then you're able to navigate that much more easily than somebody that hasn't got that information. So it's a perfect analogy. Gosh, I've just thought of it. Can you imagine if you could correlate the two? That how amazing that would be, to have iridology reading alongside, and that would be amazing.
I've been thinking that all along. I've been thinking you and I have a chat about this.
It's such a fascinating topic. For me personally, when I was writing that book, it did present to me a lot of challenges. Not in so much that there is, first of all, there's not a lot of information to go off. So I did rely on a lot of my own clinical practice, and so many people I'm so grateful to them to offer up their eyes. I mean, actually, it's like your fingerprint, isn't it? When we talk about the subject of biometrics and having these iris, it's so detailed, the iris, that it is a personal identifier. And remember, we've got two not just one. So you know, nobody alive today or who has ever lived or ever will live will have the same eyes as you, which I think is amazing.
So that brings me to two questions. Firstly, we're used to our bodies not being perfectly symmetrical. Does that mean that our irises might not be identical, the two of them?
Oh no, they're not. They're never the same.
They're never the same.
The idea is that the left side represents the mother and the yin and yang, and the right is the father. And quite often, if you do ask people, it does tend to correlate.
So
Not
then,
always, but
so we
sometimes things will come up later and you think, oh, actually, yes, I didn't think about that.
so then we were talking about fingerprints being obviously very individual, and nobody in our family even has identical prints to us. Is that the same with irises?
Yes.
So they are very unique. So
Very
here it
unique.
is. Nobody else has the same iris that I have. And even my two irises are not identical.
No.
I love it.
Like, to me, just thinking that, you know, nobody who has ever lived has had the same eyes as me or you. We're so unique. Every single one of us is just so unique. And I think my ideal goal would, instead of having a school photograph taken, your eyes done when you're a child and be presented with that information and know what that means, so that you have that information going forward. I would have loved to have had my eye photograph. So you can see yourself, you know, as you grow up, and you think, oh, that's great.
So then what you're saying is that our eyes change over time.
I don't think that they do. It's quite, I'll be honest, this again is a conundrum, because people, you know, digital photography is quite a relatively new thing. I don't think people have been documenting it as diligently as, you know, I mean, how many people do you know that have ever had their eyes photographed? So the pictures that we've got are a very small section of society, and we've only been doing it for a short period of time. I have pictures of my eyes from when I was at college and now, and they haven't changed in so far as the markings. However, I could potentially go on and develop something like a cholesterol ring, which would be because that's not an inherited marking as such. It's more of a feature, let's say.
Yes, I understand. So yes,
The right word
the genetic part remains the same,
yes,
but of course, the context in which we're experiencing life, whether it's through illness, vitamin deficiency, stress, that will become evident
yes.
in the eye. Okay.
However, if we do learn to live within our constitution, then potentially that can be avoided if we are armed with that information.
I love it. This is fantastic. So I can't wait now for the release of your book, which is
Well,
modern.
I hope it lives up to expectations. I'll be honest, I think as I was writing it, there were many, many questions, you know, all of these things that you've been asking me today. Do your eyes change? You know, some of the answers are, I don't know, but I would suggest that, you know, if we think about something like our gut microbiome that we are only just learning about, and we potentially know more about the surface of the moon than we do about our own gut microbiome. So I would hope that people will read the book with an open mind, rather than just say, oh, you know, this is, you know, to make your mind about things. There are certain things in there which are worth pondering and questioning, because we do need to know the answers to those things. It's not set in stone. There's a lot to learn, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the whole thing is, you know, it's either right or wrong, because that just
I love it.
world,
I think that it excites me hugely, the prospect that this is something that we know quite a bit about, but there's a whole world to discover within it. So this is fantastic. And I know your book comes out end of May. And at that point, I think you just have to come back again and tell us more about your book.
Well, that would be very kind. I'd love to return. Thank you very much for having me on today.
It's
So I'm looking forward to seeing what you think. I'll send you a copy.
that would be fabulous. Sarah, if people wanted to find out more about your work, do you have a website?
I do have a website. It is Alchemilla, which is the Latin name for lady's mantle. It's one of my very favourite plants. And it's .co, not .com or .co.uk. Lots of people will Google it. There is a very nice restaurant, I believe, with a similar name to me. So it is alchemilla.co. That's my website. And also I have a newsletter which I write twice a week, and it is a herbal newsletter. It's free to subscribe to, and I write a lot about iridology, herbal medicine, flower remedies, esoteric, energetic, vibrational medicine. And that's called the Herbalist Diary, and that's my Substack newsletter. So that's also something that people can read and enjoy.
Well, I will put a link to both in the description box so that everyone can find them easily. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Anna. It's lovely to meet you. Thank you.
And thank you all for watching. Do remember also to check out my own website in the description box if you want to learn more about my work and get in touch or make an appointment. Until next time, goodbye.